Our speaker today is Christie Hanzlik. Christie is a Christian Science practitioner from Boulder, Colorado, and is a volunteer for Wide Horizon. She moved to Colorado in 2006 and taught undergraduate and graduate courses at the University of Colorado Boulder for several semesters before committing to the full-time public practice of Christian Science healing in 2009. Christie loves working with youth of all ages. She has served as a practitioner at Christian Science summer camps and year-round events for more than 10 years. Christie has also served on the Christian Science Board of Lectureship for 3 years and has addressed many Christian Science associations in the U.S. and abroad. Locally, Christie has served as the chair of Colorado's statewide Christian Science Institutional Committee for 8 years. She is active in her home church in Boulder, where she enjoys teaching Sunday school and looking for new outreach opportunities. In Boulder, she lives with her husband and 2 sons and next door to her dad. Christie says that one of her favorite parts of the healing practice is taking calls from people who are new to Christian Science because she loves finding new ways to share metaphysical ideas. Her talk today is on Christian Science nurses as witnesses to divine law. I hope you find her analogies and simple way of sharing Christian Science as helpful as we do. So without further ado, here's Christie.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, and I'll try to live up to it. I am honored to be giving this talk for the Wide Horizon Christian Science Care Facility. It's in my backyard. I'm here in Boulder, and Wide Horizon is about 45 minutes away right now. The title of my talk today is Christian Science Nurses as Witnesses to Divine Law. And to illustrate what I mean by the word witnesses, I'm going to share a story with you. About 5 years ago, I was serving as a Christian Science practitioner at a Christian Science summer camp. And one morning, I was having a peaceful morning, and I got a call on the walkie-talkie that there was a horse tangled in barbed wire. Could I pray about it? And could I come on site? Now, all I knew about this situation was that this particular horse, Kit, was a spirited horse, and it was somewhat difficult to have it tangled in barbed wire. I began immediately to pray, to know that the laws of God that are good are in operation and could not be interrupted. The harmony that I was feeling that morning couldn't be interrupted, and that horse's harmony could not be interrupted. It was a simple prayer as I got ready and I got on a golf cart and headed over to where the horse was. Well, what happened was there was a crew of maintenance dads who were volunteering that session, and of anywhere they could be at camp, they happened to be on fence repair duty that day. And they went to cut that horse out of the fence. Well, this normally spirited horse was calm while they cut away the wire. When I got there, the horse was by the corral, and they were hosing it off. The corral workers were hosing it off and rinsing out where the horse's skin had been torn. And I stood and prayed, and again, just affirmed that divine law, that good was in operation here, and nothing could interrupt the harmony of good. Well, that horse stayed calm. And the wound, without medication, just a little bit of Vaseline to keep some flies away, but within 2 days, that wound was healed up. And there was no proud flesh, meaning there was no scarring from that. So in the weeks after that, I began to wonder, what was my role in that? I mean, it wasn't me that brought those those dad workers there, uh, what what really was my role? And I realized that my role was to witness God's goodness. God's goodness, divine love's goodness is always in operation, is always true. And it's up to us to witness it. It kind of reminds me of that saying, if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one there to hear it, does it make a noise? Well, if God's goodness is all around us, but none of us are there to witness it, does it still happen? Well, the good news is that we are here to witness it. And the purpose of my talk today is to emphasize the particular role of Christian Science nurses as witnesses to divine law. I've had the privilege of working with Christian Science nurses on so many cases, and I feel like it's a great privilege and honor. I hope today that you'll find in this talk the deep love and respect and partnership I feel with nurses. So the kind of witnessing that's going on here isn't just being present and watching, it's an active witnessing. And to illustrate this, I want to share the story of Jairus and his daughter. So I brought up this picture of the scene with Jairus and his daughter. And just to remind you of the story, Jairus goes to ask Jesus if he can heal his daughter who's laying and dying. And Jesus agrees, but on his way to Jairus's house, Jesus stops and heals the woman with the issue of blood. And then right after that, he starts off to Jairus's house again, and Jairus's servants come and say, "Never mind, it's too late. She's already gone." To which Jesus says, "Don't worry, all will be well." So right in the face of this terrible news, Christ Jesus is saying, no, it's going to be okay. So they go on to Jairus's house, and when they get there, everyone, he says, they're all in mourning, they're wailing, it's bedlam. And Jesus says, "Why are you making so much noise? The girl is just sleeping." And they all laugh him to scorn. They laugh at him. And that's kind of what the world seems to do to us sometimes when we, right, like in that horse example, right in the face of me knowing that harmony couldn't be interrupted, here's this horse tangled in barbed wire. But that's what Christian Science is about. It's about turning to the laws of God, even in the face of difficulty, to know that those laws are intact. As we realize that and as we witness that, we see healing. So that's what Jesus was doing. He was seeing the reality of that girl's eternal life in the face of everyone claiming that she was dead. So then Jesus puts everyone out of the room except for Jairus and his wife, and Peter and John and James. And what I like to think about is, why did he choose them? Well, obviously Jairus had faith that Jesus could heal because he was the one who went to go get Jesus. And we'll assume that the wife was also on board. And those three disciples were expectant of healing. And what I've come to think about when I think about that story is that that's the quality of thought that a Christian Science nurse can have. That Christian Science nurses have that expectancy of healing. They have a fearless faith, an understanding of God's law, and a calm assurance that all is well. And that's what I believe Christ Jesus knew he would have in those three disciples as witnesses. So to me, there are journal listed Christian Science nurses, And each of us can also strive to have the quality of thought of a Christian Science nurse. And if we want to test ourselves, see if we're ready to do some Christian Science nursing, then we could say, am I ready to be invited into that room? Would I be ready to be a witness for life right in the face of what appeared to be a disastrous scene? And that might not sound easy, but the remainder of this talk is geared to helping us prepare to have that type of thought. We're going to look now at an acronym that has come to me as a way to pray, a way to think about Christian Science prayer or Christian Science treatment. And the acronym is GLADARK, or GLADARK. Now, I want to be clear that GLADARK is not intended as a formula for Christian Science prayer or treatment. It's just one way of understanding it. So I'm going to say that again. It is not a formula, but it is a way to conceive of it. So these steps I have here are G for gratitude, L for love, A for affirm, D for deny the lie of anything unlike good, A for apply the specific divine law that applies to the case, R is reject false suggestions of negativity, and K, know that our treatment is complete. I went through that quickly, but we'll have time to go through each letter. And notice that the second A is apply the specific law. And this shows where divine law can fit into Christian Science prayer. So I'm just going to run through an example of how to use GLADARK by giving a prayer for this very talk that we're in right now. We can start with a sense of gratitude that we're all together right now. This is more than just the gratitude that your computer works. It's the gratitude that we all have chosen to prioritize our desire to know more about God and learn more about God together. That L is having that, again, desire to have a greater and more expansive sense of love for one another today. We can all feel that we are drawn to divine love and sharing in that sense of love, more than just loving kittens and puppies. This is a desire to love more purely. With the A, we can affirm the ever-presence of love, the ever-presence of principle, truth, mind, soul, spirit, life. Divine love is present with me right now, and it's present with you. We can affirm that ever-presence. With the D, we can deny that anything can get in the way of that. No bad computer connection, no distraction, nothing can interrupt our feeling the presence of divine love. That second A is applying the specific law. We can know today that divine mind is the only true communicator and is communicating to each one of us exactly what we need to hear today, including me. That R is to reject the serpentine lie, that sneaky lie that technology or distance or distraction could possibly interfere with our inspiration. That K is knowing that this prayer is complete. It's sealed. This talk and our inspiration is unfolding and complete. It's governed by divine good, and we can feel that and hear that. We can have a calm, clear sense that all is well. We can rest assured. So that's an example of how you could run through GLADARK. And for me, what's happened over the years is as I've done that more and more, it's more of all one action in prayer. But for today, I'm going to go through each step. And with each step, I'm going to illustrate it with an account of a healing I shared with a Christian Science nurse. For the first example, we're going to go to G for gratitude. And this is, again, that gratitude that heals is a transformative gratitude. It's not just grateful for puppies and kittens and balloons. That's easy. This is a gratitude to go up higher. Mary Baker Eddy, as you know, had a difficult life. And yet it led to her discovery of Christian Science. It led to her discovery of the divine laws that heal. And later she would say about those struggles and trials, God had been graciously preparing her. Well, that's an example of gratitude that heals. It's gratitude for what pushes us higher, pushes us deeper, pushes us to understand God more. So there was a time in my late teens when my parents were out of town and I was out with 5 other friends. A friend of mine was driving and we were in Houston on a 6-lane freeway and a drunk driver hit us. Our car spun out of control, rolled down a hill, and we landed upside down. All of us were safe. I was able to climb out the windshield and get to safety. We all were kind of huddled off to the side, and the car actually blew up. There was an ambulance there who was very troubled by what they said was a broken cheekbone, and they wanted to take me to the hospital. Well, that didn't feel comfortable to me at that time. And right then, a woman came up and offered to drive a friend and I home. This highway angel, I like to think of her, was so kind, and she drove me home. Well, here I am, again, my parents are out of town. So what did we do? We had a Christian Science nurse come to the house. That Christian Science nurse came, and her presence, now, honestly, I don't remember her name, but her presence there changed the atmosphere of the room. Immediately, I was able to see this as an opportunity to feel and to learn more about God's provision. I saw how we had been protected all along. This nurse took practical steps and took glass out of my hand and made sure that I was comfortable. She made sure I was safe. Eventually, my parents did come home, and I was able to sleep. And I just remember sleeping very soundly. I went to bed that Friday night, and over the weekend experienced a perfect healing. By Monday, I was able to go to school with no effects, and what's more, I was able to drive, down the later on without having a sense of fear, and that in itself is a huge healing. But that nurse's presence, that Christian Science nurse's presence, to bring about that attitude of gratitude that heals, even though the situation seems so dire, that there is that atmosphere of expectancy, that calm expectancy of healing, to see divine law in action. Our next letter is L for love. It's again a deeper sense of love. It's not just loving cute and easy things, loving those people who are easy to love, but loving more purely. What I like to think about are the 3 degrees of love. And I get this from page 115 of Science and Health, where Mary Baker Eddy talks about the scientific translation of mortal mind, and she talks about the 3 degrees of thought. And if we were to think about the 3 degrees in terms of love, maybe it would look like this. I could love chocolate, and I do, and I could love raspberries. But chocolate melts when you leave it in the car, and raspberries sometimes go bad. A second degree form of love is a little bit more robust than that. A second degree love would have humanity and compassion and affection. It could even be being patient with someone who doesn't seem to deserve it. Now, that second degree love is wonderful, and it's a wonderful step along the way. And yet, it's still not the radical love that heals. The radical love that heals is loving the unlovable, loving our enemies, loving so purely that we see beyond personality, we see beyond the outward appearance of things. We love because God loves. We love because we are loving. That deep and abiding sense of love is that love that heals in Christian Science prayer. So I'm going to illustrate this with a story about a boy at a Christian Science summer camp. Again, I was serving as a Christian Science practitioner, and I got a call that a boy had injured his leg pretty severely at a low ropes course. And I got the Christian Science nurse, and she and I got on a golf cart to go get the boy. Well, we got there, and this was not a dramatic kid. This is a pretty calm and chill kid, but he was in it seemed like a lot of pain. And she and I were able to, she was able to take some practical steps to load him safely into the golf cart. And we made our way slowly back to the care facility. And as we did that, I was just holding to the truth of the divine laws in action right then, that love had been present that whole time at that ropes course, that love was present right with us on that golf cart, and that each one of us could feel it. Well, when we got back to the care facility, this boy was still in a bit of pain. The Christian Science nurse was so wise, because instead of getting him in a position where he couldn't move and all, she just had this expectancy of healing. She just knew. And immediately we began to talk to the boy about his reason and purpose for being at camp. And really, it was to love. His purpose was to love. And he saw that what he was doing with his friends wasn't just about goofing off and having fun, but really loving them and wanting to be with them to express more and more love. So we went from kind of a second degree love to this deeper sense of eternal love. And at one point, it just became clear that it would be okay for this boy to try to walk. Well, I remember, as serious as it seemed at the time, the nurse and I were able to get on both sides of the boy, and we were able to act kind of like human crutches to give him a test drive. And as he was doing this, he was just affirming his desire to love and his desire to be with his friends to express this love. Well, soon we were able to make our way to lunch. And as we did that, I could see that the closer we got to lunch, the more joy and freedom that this boy was feeling, and I was feeling it too. Well, we got to lunch, and he sat down with his friends. Halfway through lunch, I kind of just kept an eye on him, and he was able to swing his legs out from the bench. That was pretty impressive. Well, after lunch, the boys had a Zumba class, which is highly unusual, but I'll never forget it because he was there front and center with the Zumba instructor. And in fact, he jumped up on stage, was Zumbaing right next to her, jumped off and did a 180 and landed. He was laughing, and I was back away from where they were dancing, and I had tears streaming down my face. It was such a radical demonstration of divine love's ever presence. And that Christian Science nurse's calm expectation of healing, she had this fearless sense that all was well, and we all saw it. And yeah, it was neat because as I was preparing for this talk, I made sure to get permission from everybody I'm sharing accounts of. And I went and checked in with this boy and his mother. They both remember the story. He never had any after effects, but he does remember the extremeness of it. But something else was really neat about this. Before camp, for years, this boy had struggled with extreme allergies that would incapacitate him in the spring and in the fall. And it got to the point after years of this, and he had to miss all kinds of spring and fall sports, that his father wanted to take him in to have a medical diagnosis. What they found was that he had a deviated septum, and they were going to have surgery for it. And the mother had requested that they, wait until after camp. Well, as it turns out, when they returned from camp, it was in the fall, the boy had no symptoms of allergies. They ultimately went back in to the surgeon and found that there was no need for surgery. Everything was corrected, and the boy never suffered from allergies again. And now he's in college and doing well. So this G and L of GladArc is the gratitude and love. And gratitude and love alone are sufficient for instantaneous and eternal healing. As Mary Baker Eddy says, gratitude and love should abide in every heart each day of the year. And I think that absolutely characterizes what Christian Science nursing is also, right? A Christian Science nurse always has that gratitude and love. The next letter that I'd like to share is the A. Affirm the allness and ever-presence of God. And this one I'd like to explain with a story where it was probably about 8 years ago, and I've checked in with this patient to make sure it was okay to share this. She called me from the hospital because she had been diagnosed with some kind of super flu, where they said it was going to take 10 months of physical rehabilitation and so forth. And so I got this call, and then later on that day, I got just a text letting me know that she was unable to speak. And when I talked to her recently, she described to me, oh yes, she lost the ability to do anything. She couldn't even lift up the phone, let alone call or text after that. Well, those were the last things I heard. I had this call, and then I had this text, and she was states away. But we can affirm the allness and ever-presence of God. And as an expression of that ever presence of God's tender care, I was able to find a Christian Science nurse in her state. And this Christian Science nurse went to the hospital and checked in and was present at her bedside and was able to call me and give me live reports on what was going on. I thought of her as the eyes on the scene, but now that I'm thinking about it, she was really a witness, wasn't she? She was a witness for the divine law of love that was present with this sweet woman. Well, when I talked to my friend recently, she said that Christian Science nurse's visit is what awakened her to the fact that she could indeed experience healing, and she did not need to give in to this diagnosis. Within 2 days, within 24 to 48 hours, she left the hospital. That weekend, she traveled to Illinois to do an educational workshop. And she remembers that nurse's visit as just that spark of being aware that God was present. It's not as if we're in the hospital or in Christian Science, that we are always in the kingdom of heaven. We're always in the atmosphere of love divine. And what she felt was that in the hospital, she was surrounded by that atmosphere of love divine. and that Christian Science nurse, as a witness, helped her to take the steps she needed for complete healing. The next letter that I'm going to talk about is D. Deny any hint of inharmony. This is knowing that nothing can diminish the light of life, the light of love. This story may sound a little bit heavier, but it's so important for us to be able to grasp this sense. There was a difficult time in my life back in 2008. I had 2 young children at home, both under 4. I was teaching at CU Boulder, and my mom was struggling quite a bit, and it didn't look very good. And we had called in a Christian Science nurse, and this Christian Science nurse lived in the home where my mom was, and was able to tend to basic needs, all kinds of things, whether it was food, laundry, whatever it was, keeping that house in perfect order. Meantime, she was also maintaining an atmosphere of thought. It was as if she was on watch, seeing the continuity of life, the ever presence of life. I would fly out about every other weekend and be there, and each time I'd go, I was able to have these beautiful late night conversations with this Christian Science nurse. The wisdom she had as a great grandmother are so precious. And as a great grandmother and a Christian Science nurse, just all this experience to be able to share with me. Well, my mom passed, and on that night, I just had such a clear sense that all was well, that the mantle, the light was mine. I could see that there was a continuity of life, that life could not end. I was healed of grief. I want to say almost immediately. I'll say within 24, 48 hours. I was healed of grief within 48 hours. It was as if nothing had interrupted the light that was true about my mother. I could feel her presence. I felt a sense of connection. And I felt just a beauty and an order to things that couldn't be interrupted. When I talked to that nurse recently, she said that she felt that too, that she felt like she was witnessing life. Now that might seem difficult to grasp, because right in the face of what seemed like death, we were upholding and feeling a sense of life. And I have an illustration of that. Okay, so if you have a circle, right? And this circle is a representation of eternity. It never ends. It has a circle symbolizes the fact of no beginning and no end, right? But if I were to take a piece of paper and cover that up, well, the circle's still here, but now we can't see it. So this would be kind of a first degree view, right? Where you can't see the eternality of life. Or another way we could do it is maybe if we covered up part of it. And when we cover up part of it, then we're seeing hints of the circle. Maybe this is more like second degree, right? We're seeing hints of it. We're seeing hints of a circle, but it looks as if there's birth, and then things get better. Oh, great. Oh, and then, oh, this is wonderful. Oh, but then there's decline. And then we see over here, death, right? That's what it looks like. But when we're able to pray, when we're able to really pay attention to what's going on, we can see beyond the outward appearance of things and see the whole view. Sometimes it's more as if you have this view. like you're seeing through a veil. And that's what this experience felt like to me. It felt like right when the world and all the details surrounding this experience were covering up that circle, I was able to get a clear view of that whole life, the uninterruptibility, the beginninglessness and endlessness of true life. And this Christian Science nurse was able to do that as well. In fact, she's still a dear part of our family. She's been on vacations with us. And when I talked to her recently, she said one of the most special parts about that experience, being a witness for the continuity of life, was that she was able to participate in a small family gathering on the beach. And she just said that the joy and the sense of just that sense of all of us cherishing eternal life together was so meaningful for her. So that's often the case, isn't it? When it's not just an individual healing of grief, but this was a collective healing of grief when we share in that experience. And that's what a Christian Science nurse can do at those precious moments that we experience, is elevate and be a witness for good, right where things seem dire. And that's so special to me. It's just a good hint of what it means to deny any hint of inharmony. To go back to that circle example, that Christian Science nurse was denying that anything could interrupt the continuity of good and the continuity of life. And that brought about an immediate sense of healing of grief, not just in myself, but in others in my family. The next letter that I'd like to talk about is the A. Apply the specific law that counters the false claim against God. Now, this doesn't just mean looking up citations, which would mean, looking up things in Science and Health or in the Bible. This is discovering or listening for the divine law that eliminates fear and reveals love's ever-presence. This is the law that corrects and governs the situation already. We're not making the law true. We're discovering the law that is actually in operation already. Divine law does not change the facts of being. It brings us into harmony with it. And underneath on the screen, I have a picture of the dawn, because that to me is what symbolizes what applying the law is all about. The dawn is going to happen. Whether we pray for it or not, there's going to be a dawn tomorrow. The sun will rise tomorrow. Even if we didn't believe it, even if we chanted, 100 of us chanted on the beach saying, "Don't rise," it would still rise. It's still happening, just like the laws, the divine laws of God are still happening. We can't make it happen, but having an understanding of it and trusting in them gives us a sense of calm assurance that all is well. And of course, the reason that we know that the dawn is going to happen and the sun is going to rise is because the sun is already there. The sun's not actually rising. The sun is always there. It's the earth that's turning so that we can see the sun. So in the same way, as we understand the metaphysics behind the laws of God, we can trust in them more. In a sense, there's like those 3 degrees of love, perhaps there's 3 degrees of law. The first degree of law would be like hygiene laws, dietary laws, muscular, medical, criminal laws. The second degree of laws could be moral laws, humanity, honesty, affection, compassion. Those are all good things, and we should do them. But it's still not quite the law that heals. That's a radical departure that really heals and uncovers that full circle view. It wouldn't have been enough for Christ Jesus to have compassion on Jairus's daughter. He needed to have a sense of that third degree divine law of her unending life. That divine law is the law of spirit, understanding, purity, harmony, health, which is our at one-ment with God. When we feel health, we're feeling that at one-ment with God, and we can never be separated from that. That's that divine law view. And holiness. As we have that third degree view, it overturns the outward appearance of things. To illustrate this experience or this idea, there was a time, again, at summer camp when I was serving as a Christian Science practitioner, that I was down talking with a Christian Science nurse, and a boy was brought in who apparently had been in boys' camp, and they had been throwing rocks and seeing who could throw it the farthest, and this boy got hit on the head. And oh, the boy who threw it felt really awful. And I'll wrap that up later. But the boy came in, and there seemed to be blood just all over. I mean, it was pretty messy. And the Christian Science nurse we looked at each other with just a sense of calm, just a sense of the law that came to me was it's all for show. And that seemed like a kind of a funny thing, but oftentimes that's what the divine laws do. They kind of arrest your thought and startle you to see a deeper, calmer view. And I said to her, it's all for show. And she and I had worked together so much that she kind of laughed and agreed. We covered up the mirrors and kept the boy calm, and we began to clean it up. And while we did that, we talked about forgiveness, and we talked about loving those other boys at camp and so forth. And I just had this clear sense that all of the drama and all of the messiness of this was all for show. We got him cleaned up, and there was no wound. There was nothing there. It was all for show. All that drama was all for show. Well, when I talked to the mom about it recently, she heard us say, the mom was also at camp. When she heard us say it's all for show, it meant something different to her. To her, it meant God's goodness is here to show that this is an opportunity for God's goodness to shine, and that God's goodness is for showing us what's really good and true. And I love that, because what ended up happening, of course, was this boy did have a sense of forgiveness. And when he went back out to boys' camp and those boys saw him, he left kind of covered in ick, and he came back and with no injury and completely happy. Their jaws dropped. That boy who had thrown the rock was, he apologized, but so instantly felt that sense of forgiveness. It was just a really beautiful thing. And it was for the show of God's love tenderly touching each one of us in that experience. And I love that example, because it's one law came to me and it meant one thing, and then that same law meant something different to that mother. And it's God speaks to each one of us. Divine mind speaks to each one of us in the way that we need to hear it. The R of Glad Arc is reject the sneaky serpent or false suggestion of negativism in all of its forms. And for this example, it's another case that happened at a Christian Science summer camp, but there was a counselor who had, it seemed like a bite on her thumb. We didn't have it diagnosed, but it appeared to be a pretty serious bite. And the Christian Science nurse needed to bandage it. Well, this particular patient was pretty afraid. The symptoms were pretty scary looking. And so we decided that each time there was a rebandaging needed, so anytime she was in the water and at least every day, that it would be right to have the Christian Science practitioner and the Christian Science nurse present. Well, as we went through this, I have to say that there were moments when I was feeling afraid. And this Christian Science nurse just met this situation with such calm assurance. She had this fearless faith, an understanding of divine law, and a calm assurance that all was well. This excellent example of Christian Science nursing snapped me right out of that mesmerism of being afraid for this counselor. I was able to meet the case, and each time, this happened over a period of 2 days, where each time we would meet with this girl and change this bandage, again, I felt like the Christian Science nurse was nursing me, not just this patient. And it was such a wonderful example of that partnership. Now, the kinds of suggestions that were coming to me were of the situation worsening, of that it would never reverse, it would never heal. This could be really serious. Are we doing the right thing? Each time, one of those sneaky kind of undermining my sense of divine law being present and in operation, each time one of those sneaky things would come up, that Christian Science nurses consistent expectancy of healing woke me right up, and I was able to feel the presence of divine love. Ultimately, of course, the thumb was completely healed, and before the end of the session, we were able to see complete healing and no need for a bandage. This K of glad arc is to know that your prayer is complete. And this is more a sense of an attitude that all is well. You know, a Christian Science healer and a Christian Science nurse, there's no room for worrying or rushing or imagining what if or how are things going to turn out. It's knowing that this prayer is effective. It's a calm, clear sense that all is well. And to illustrate this is kind of a preventative thing. I've experienced this in a number of ways, but at the Christian Science summer camp, I remember there's a certain field we always play capture the flag in, and it seemed like every capture the flag night there'd be some kind of injury and we had great healings. And there was a kid that had an ankle injury and it was healed within 24 hours. And it was just really beautiful things, but still it seemed unnecessary to have this wonderful event full of fun and exercise to result in any kind of inharmony. So the Christian Science nurse and I kind of went on watch, and we decided to be proactive and to affirm ahead of time that no, nothing could interrupt the goodness of this event. And we were so clear on that as we prayed. And then we sat with that K of knowing that our prayer was complete. And we really sat with that, and I've been able to work with her for a few years after this. And each year, when it's time for capture the flag or another event, we'll sit together and kind of, I'm going to say, bask in that knowing that our prayer is complete. And we just say, isn't it wonderful that there's no cases? Isn't it wonderful that all is well? And we just feel that sense of no worry, no hurry, just knowing with complete assurance that God's laws are in effect. My favorite illustration of this idea of knowing that the prayer is complete is the well-known painting of Daniel in the lion's den. I put a picture of this up here. You can see that Daniel's hands are bound and he's looking at the lions. And he's just got this attitude of calm, even though the lions seem to have all kinds of looks on their faces, from shame and anger and hostility and fear and all these animalistic emotions. Daniel is completely calm in the sense that all is well. To me, that's witnessing the laws of God. And there's a subsequent painting of this, of Daniel in the lion's den, where it's called Daniel's Answer to the King. And in this one, you can see that Daniel is now looking at the window. It's dawn, which means the king's about to come. He's made it through the night. And you can see that those lions each have been subdued. The looks of fear and anger and hostility have now been subdued, and those lions are looking calmly at Daniel, and Daniel has his back to them. This posture of knowing that the prayer is complete is what we can all have as we're gaining that sense of the qualities it takes to be a Christian Science nurse. Each one of us can strive to have those qualities of thought, the qualities of thought that it takes to do effective Christian Science nursing, so that we would be ready, if called, to be in that room with Jairus' daughter, expecting healing. That glad arc that we just went through, if we look at the word arc is safety, the idea or reflection of truth. That's what we are safe in. We are all safe in the ark. And that's such a nice way of just sealing us together. So I think we have a little bit more time, and I just want to have a final note about the role of the patient when working with a Christian Science nurse. Now, we've talked a lot about the attitude of the Christian Science nurse and what the Christian Science nurse brings to healing, but what can the patient bring? And to illustrate this, my ideas on this, I want to share a healing that happened this summer. A dear friend of mine, there was no explanation for it, but all of a sudden, his hip went out of joint. It's kind of like Jacob in the hollow of his thigh. The hip just went out of joint and he was unable to walk. Now, my friend, I don't know anyone more capable. I don't know anyone stronger than this friend. I don't know anyone more hardworking. So this was particularly debilitating for him. And we have a great track record of healing, and he's published many healings in the Christian Science periodicals. So we were expectant of healing right away. And we had that gratitude, that love. We could affirm the ever-presence. We could deny that anything could interrupt. We could apply the specific law. Nothing can stop us from doing God's work. We are never more safe than when we're doing God's work. We could reject the sneaky serpent trying to tell us that something was amiss. And we could know that our treatment was complete. And yet there seemed to be something else that was needed. He seemed to be in a lot of pain, and I suggested to him that he consult one of the 3 Christian Science nurses where we were at this summer camp. And he didn't want to do it. He's, I can go back to my house. And he wasn't ready to see one of the Christian Science nurses. And one of them, in fact, was a very strong man who I thought could help my friend and lift him and so forth. But my friend wouldn't have it. He went back that night. This was a Friday night, and he and I talked about this recently. And he said he spent 2 days in excruciating pain. And I'm praying, and I'm knowing that there is complete receptivity to goodness, that all of us can feel the presence of divine love right here, right now. Well, my friend later let me know, later this day, that he let the Christian Science nurse come into his home. And this was a huge shift for him. The Christian Science nurse was able to show him ways that he could be more comfortable. She was able to give him what she called the space for healing. She was able to make an adjustment with the bed, which wasn't appropriate for what he was dealing with. She was able to give him a chair for the shower, just to help him with some practical details. He says that this was a shift in his thought, the humility that it took to accept care was so great for him. He was able at that point to feel a sense of God's presence. He told me that he slept peacefully through the night, and in the morning, he felt so good. He almost jumped out of bed and he said, "Oh, wait, stop! I'm going to read my Bible lesson first." And to him, that was a huge step, because here he was just wanting to bound out of bed now that he could, but he stopped, and that showed to him a even more sense of healing. That day, he was able to go about his work, and by Wednesday night, the time of the Wednesday night testimony meeting, I have this clear memory of my friend bounding down the stairs to give his healing, and to give a testimony of his healing. And when he shared that testimony, I'm not hurt by this, but he didn't talk about the role of the Christian Science practitioner at all. He only talked about the role of the Christian Science nurse. And he said that having that humility to let himself be cared for was the changing point, the shift in thought that he needed. And so I think that's what we can all be. We can all simultaneously strive to be that witness and have those nursing qualities, but we can meanwhile also have that receptivity of tenderness, to be willing to accept the appropriate nurturing from others, and to really allow ourselves to be cared for, watched over, loved, and protected, as my friend felt that day. We can all strive for those qualities of thought necessary to be effective Christian Science nurses. Whether we go into the public practice of Christian Science nursing, or whether we care for family members in our house, whether we care for strangers on the street, we can do so with the qualities of thought of a Christian Science nurse. The qualities of thought necessary to be a witness for divine law. And we can also have that humility to allow ourselves to be nurtured, because we are worthy of feeling that gentle nursing presence. Thank you. And thank you for being here. And thank you all for supporting the idea of Christian Science nursing.
Thank you, Christie, for your wonderful discussion of the subject, Christian Science nurses as witnesses to divine law. It was much appreciated. And thank you all for attending today. We look forward to seeing you under more normal circumstances in a year, and appreciated your attending today. So now let's conclude the meeting in the traditional fashion by singing hymn number 218. And when that hymn is completed, please consider the meeting to be adjourned. Thank you all for attending again.